with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Roll call of the board.
Ms. Staub. Here. Mr. Hernandez.
Present.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Yes, here.
Ms. Quintero.
Present.
Mr. Crouch.
Present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Staub.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez.
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Yes.
Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Mr. Amil, do you have any board comments this morning?
No, sir.
Mr. Hernandez, do you have any board comments this morning?
I just want to thank all of the folks who made the Alumni Foundation's Hall of Fame dinner and congratulate the two new inductees who are here on the dais, Mr. Holmes and Ms. Quintero, on the very well-deserved honor.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Dr. Bergman.
Well, she's not at the dais right now.
I did see her.
But yes, also Dr. Bergman, who received the honor. I think it was really exciting to see folks who have contributed so much to the community, and it's always a great event. So congratulations, and there was so many staff that put in a lot of work and effort to make it a success. So I just wanted to share my appreciation for letting me join you all at that event.
Thank you.
Ms. Quintero.
I just I want to thank everybody for that, and I just had a sad week because of the shooting that happened in Las Vegas, and it affected Desert View's a student who graduated back in 2009, and so she's still on life support. And I'm just sad about that. But I know that people have come forward and helped donate for her recovery. So it's up to $9,000 so far. So that's it. Thank you.
Ms. Dahl.
Oh, I also want to send my congratulations for getting into the Hall of Fame. That was fantastic, and it was a great evening. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it, and enjoyed all the pictures and everything that we got to see, with everything happening. So that was really great. So that was a good thing that we have every year. And congratulations, and Dr. Berman too, in your absence. Maybe you'll see maybe you'll see this tape. So I congratulate her also. And just really quick, some talk here at this point in time about things we might have seen. I just want to remind everybody that I know most people aren't here, but just remind everybody that verbally here, without going into a lot of details, to please not to text while you're driving, especially if you're in a Sunnyside vehicle and people know for sure you're a Sunnyside person. But even if you're not in a Sunnyside vehicle and you are on Sunnyside business and you're driving around and something should occur because you're texting while you're driving on Sunnyside business, then that all comes back to us in the media and stuff. So not only that, your lives are much more worth, whatever text you're trying to send out. So please make sure that all of the staff in Sunnyside remember not to be texting while they're driving.
I'd just like to add to my congratulations to Mr. Holmes, Dr. Bergman, and Ms. Quintero for the Alumni Hall of Fame. And I'm sorry I wasn't there, but thank you for letting me come back from Alaska. So,
With gifts. Thank you.
And see the tape at the beginning so you see everybody else. Congratulations.
okay. We don't have any superintendent comments on this agenda. Did you want to make some?
A few comments. As you know, the AFR is a requirement every year that we need to approve it before a certain date in October. Since this is the only board meeting since we only have one general functions meeting, this is why I just want the public to know why we're having an early morning meeting instead of an afternoon to approve the consent agenda. What's new, quite frankly, and kind of why there had been a delay is this year is the first time that we were able to blend entitlement funds with our budget. So we've become what we call a school-wide Title I, or excuse me, school-wide entitlement program. That allows a district to use federal dollars and M&O so they can actually cross-blend funds. It gives a little bit more flexibility for districts, and it's open for districts where the majority, if not all their schools, receive Title I funds. And I think that's the big difference of why we're able to do that. Pretty much every one of our schools qualify for Title I, and as a result, it gives us some flexibility, particularly in our high schools and middle schools where a lot of our staffing is supported through a blended funding sources. So that's the discussion today. So you'll see a little bit of discussion around that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Staub,
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo,
Yes.
Ms. Quintero,
Aye.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is general functions, the 2016-17 annual financial report.
Miss Mr. Encinas to get some last minute details. I'll make sure he arrives.
Anybody have a song or a dance?
We'll take a 5-minute break.
There's no item here for future agenda items.
I think it's since it's a special board meeting, you probably don't just have it on the agenda.
Can we still talk about it? Can we still talk about it? Probably not.
It's not an action item, so it's basically just a
Item.
information, yeah.
Sarah, maybe for the next, since Mr. Holmes isn't there to hear this, for the next board meeting, if we could have on there our county meeting as one of the
Updates.
agenda items, the one that we went to last night.
Oh,
And I've already asked Mr. Holmes to put on the agenda for the next board meeting that the board self-assessment tool from the county meeting, and also the bylaw changes that will be coming up from the county meeting, so. Or actually, it's from the state. It was at the county meeting last night, but it was for the Arizona School Board Association.
are we on break?
We're basically on break right now.
So,
Short recess.
so Robert, you didn't run to the county meeting last night.
What was yesterday?
Yesterday.
Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Not available on Wednesdays.
Oh, okay. Forever?
So if we move the board meetings to Wednesday, that would be bad?
All depends.
So you got a certificate last night, which about you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they give that to you?
Yeah, he asked for it, yeah.
I went up and got it, but no, they gave it to me.
He was getting everything else.
I wasn't. I was gonna go, but
Good.
we had these silly things at the legislature, and I didn't get out until about 8 o'clock, and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna make it.
No, you wouldn't have made it.
But I'd let Sarah know that I probably wouldn't make it because they had changed our schedule, and now I have to drive back, go home after this change and go up to the Capitol again. Thank you.
Oh, my gosh.
Go back today.
This is gonna be the 4th time this week that I'm going up. Yeah.
It's only the 4th day of the week, so.
Right.
That's crazy.
Aye.
Okay, we're back on the agenda now. Under general functions, 2016-17 annual financial report. Mr. Encinas.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. First of all, my apologies to the board and those waiting for this very special news as far as what happened last year. And this is why we're here today, to present to the governing board the 2016-17 annual financial report. This report is due to be filed with the ADE on or before October 15th of every fiscal year. No excuses, but this has been a very struggling effort this past year, this report itself, primarily because of the decision that we made earlier this year to go school-wide 3, where we would blend title funds, Title 1, 2, and 3, with district funds, and that required some accounting measures in terms of being able to allocate formally M&O expenditures and title expenditures based on a formula. And we didn't have that formula till at the end of the year, which would have resulted in some accounting nightmares, okay? So first of all, I'm asking the governing board today to approve this report based on our requirement to file it on before October 15th, with the understanding that there's some revisions, adjustments that will have to be made to reflect the true 100% accuracy of the information. Right now, I can tell you honestly, it's not entirely accurate. It's pretty accurate. We're down close. Good news is our budget balance carried forward into the following year, 2017-18, is around $4.8 million. Our expenditures in M&O were $80 million, roughly, here we go. They're roughly $80 million, $80,101,000. Our budget was $84,887,000. So the difference of, it says here there's cash of 3.8, but the actual budget balance carried forward is around $4.8 million. The other information in terms of what's important is our capital outlay. We did have a balance in our unrestricted capital outlay of about $982,000 that's going to be carried forward to the next year. So everybody knows that the state is not funding school districts for capital needs. That's one of the big struggles we're still faced with. But fortunately in our case, we still have some amount of funds that we will be able to carry forward under capital outlay. Overall, the district's operation last year was in the positive. Bond funds were expended as approved by the voters, with input and recommendations from Bach. And if you have any questions, what I would like to do, to be honest, and give true consideration to this report and discussion, is to bring it back on the October 25th meeting for full discussion. We'll provide you the report and any adjustments and revisions prior to that. You'll have adequate time to review it and ask some questions. So basically, at this time, we would ask the governing board to approve the AFR as submitted.
Mr. Hallamil?
What I'd like to see also, Hector, if you would please, especially on the M&O, is a breakdown of where all that expenditures go to, so they can have more or less a snapshot of where the funding goes.
And we'll give you that report before you leave today. Especially, it'll break down by functions where we spend money as far as instruction, general administration, school administration, central administration, operations. That breakdown is being provided. We're just making copies right now.
And then I had a question. What is teacher age?
Teacher age?
Teacher
Okay,
age.
that is,
I saw that.
in many cases, in many school districts where the school district provides room and board for teachers,
Oh,
they collect rent from the teacher for providing that housing. What reflects in our case here is that, if you recall, we used to have our residents,
yeah,
we collected rent from them, and we deposited those funds under teacherage.
okay.
That was-
So we should
Mr.
have
Hernandez?
0 next year.
Yes, ma'am. It's like we have it because we transferred it all over to
Security.
school plant or civic center. M&O?
Mr. Hernandez?
Thank you, Mr. Crouch. Mr. Encinas, if we're going to bring this up at a regular board meeting, there are a couple things that I know that I've gotten questions over the years, and I've done my best to explain it, but not being the the finance expert that you are, if we're going to have it at a full board meeting, I'd love for us to have a little bit of an explanation, even if it's just a couple minutes, on the capital outlay budget and what that's used for. And also, one of the questions that I get a lot from people is, why do we carry budget forward? Because a lot of people say, well, why are you cutting if you are carrying things forward? So I think it would be really helpful, so that way folks can understand why we have these different measures that we have to use to try and, budget this way, because school finance is really complicated. And then there was one more that impact aid revenue, no, sorry, that's not it, where was it? emergency deficiencies corrections and debt service were two things that I know what the debt service is, I think. But it's been a while since we've talked about that, so if we could talk about that. And then what is emergency deficiencies correction? I don't remember seeing that before.
Entirely SFB, School Facilities Board funds.
Okay.
So,
Which we're not getting.
well, it depends on the emergency. If we have an emergency, we're filing for some this year.
Okay.
Where we have an emergency, we submit an application for emergency funding from SFB.
For a roof or?
It could be roof, it could be
Okay.
air conditioning replacement.
Flooring, okay.
Yeah, so that's what the emergency division, it's all School Facilities Board's funds.
Perfect, yeah, so if we could have, the emergency deficiencies fund, I don't think is one, but the debt service, the, capital outlay, and then, budget balance carry forward would be really helpful.
Mr. Holmes?
Yep, I'd like if Mr. Encinas can kind of walk through with the governing board, kind of the technicalities of going school-wide and the kind of delays. What does that entail, so we get a better picture of kind of why it's so much different from this year in terms of, because the bottom line is we're still in the black, there's still carryover. It's really the internal accountability of blending funds has delayed some of these pieces. But I want to see if Mr. Encinas can kind of walk us through a little bit so there's a better understanding that there's not a functionality of concern relative to the budget lines. It's how do you make sure that you blend funds so that it actually at the end of the day it ends up even.
My understanding is as follows. If a district qualifies for title funds, okay, then what happens, those funds are supposed to be used for expenditures that supplement the district's basic expenditures. Like, if you have a classroom teacher, then a regular classroom teacher, you can't use the title funds to supplement, to take the place of the regular M&O expenditure. That's the typical operation of title funds versus M&O. M&O, the basic funds that you provide, title funds are supplementary. My understanding now is the result of school-wide is that if you have title funds and you have M&O funds, you can blend them all into one, okay? And pay your normal classroom teacher's salary, a percentage of that salary from title funds. That's created the nightmare as far as what percentage do you use for every school. It is a different percentage by school, depending on how much M&O expenditure
On the
you have to
population.
begin with, will depend on how much of the blend will be from title funds. That is a bear, okay? It's a nightmare. And I don't see any benefit from doing that, because if title funds are supplementary and to use to be supplementary services, keeping them separate is very, very clean and clear, saying this is the basic expenditure of a school district based on what it's responsible to provide. And title funds are supplementary. So any service that you receive that you provide supplementary, I'll be paid out of title funds. But the blending didn't provide us with any benefit.
Mr. Holmes?
And the justification for moving down that road, quite frankly, had a lot to do with kind of our budget diminishing over time. And so what's happened in the past, because we keep both budget streams clean, is that you don't supplant. In other words, you don't 1 year pay for something out of M&O and then later pay for it out of Title I. That's been kind of the ongoing no-no when it comes to school finances. The flexibility it allows, though, is if your M&O budget continues to shrink and you want to maintain a certain amount of program and staffing, this is where you have some flexibility to dip into those entitlement funds. We're not at that stage yet, but we're hedging because we also know we're in a decline in enrollment. And so that flexibility was necessary to at least get in front of at that particular point in time. Although it's become a nightmare with accounting to try to figure that out, it does still give us some flexibility. So now we're going to have this conversation whether we're at that point in time where we still want to have that flexibility, or do we just keep the budget separate for now, knowing full well that we may have the flexibility in the future. But I just want to kind of explain a little bit to the public who's wondering, why did you even think about blending? What's the purpose? What benefit is there when there's, this accounting piece? It really is flexibility when it comes to supplanting, which has been a big issue in the past. Don't pay for something out of title that you can't pay for. But if our enrollment had continued to decrease, and we're still kind of sitting fairly even right now, then there may come a time where we have to say, okay, title will pick up classroom teachers so we can maintain a certain amount of class size that in reality we wouldn't have been able to do in the past.
But it does eliminate also as a requirement of time and effort documentation.
That's the other. Time and effort, if you're an employee that's paid out blended funds, you have to keep a log that says how much of your time is being used in that particular, and that also is accounting for time. So you guys that know, Ms. Dawn, you have real. So I think it's worth having a little bit more just kind of discussion here in the dais, so both the public and the board is aware of the pluses and minuses of going down there, but going down the road of school-wide 3, but also just being real, I guess, real clear and transparent in the way we're looking at the budget and the complications with doing that in the back end.
Mr. Hernandez?
Mr. Encinas, at this point, I'm trying to remember, how many days are we into the school year?
Right now,
Yeah.
approximately
45.
45. And then, because I'm looking at the count, since we're unfortunately in the current year funding process, do we anticipate any major changes? Have we seen anything that might be either a positive or a negative trend to be aware of as we're looking to, the 100-day count or even beyond that?
Mr. Project, I can speak to that for Mr. Hernandez. As of now, we're actually above last year's numbers when it comes to enrollment.
Okay.
And so if they hold steady, then we should see a flatness in our enrollment, which will actually benefit our budget at the end. We anticipated and budgeted this, created this year's budget based on a count of roughly 15,257 students. I think that's around close. And so as a result of that, we may be sitting closer to 15.4 and change. So that swing benefits of, particularly in current year funding, which we get monthly payments based on who's showing up. And it gets it gets rectified every month up until the 100th day, where there's a finalization and you get your payment based on your final 100-day count for the rest of the remaining periods. So that bodes well for us. We're still kind of just seeing month to month and making sure we don't have kids exiting without some kind of exit survey, so we can maintain our enrollment. But as of now, we're actually up from what we anticipated and what we budgeted for this year based on current year funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Aramill?
Mr. Encinas, on the last, could you explain to me that last sentence, fortunately set aside, we're allowed to, a 1-year exemption? What is that, what does that actually mean?
That was for last year, for the 2016-17. If we would have had to have fallen under the requirements for current year funding last year, we would have had a budget of about
15.5.
15.5, 300 kids, times that, about $1.2 million less. Okay? But because of that 1-year exemption, we were allowed to have our 15-16 budget based on the prior year's enrollment of 15,822. So we're and that's gone now. So basically, we're going, our budget this year is really a reduction from 15,822 to 15,227 right now, 257. And so it's about 600 kids that we actually had a budget reduced by. But fortunately, if enrollment stays at up to the 100th day of around 15.5, we'll be able to increase our budget from the 15,257 to what a 15.5 by before May 15th.
Okay.
So we'll have a budget increase. And we'll bring that to the board if that results.
Thank you.
Mr. Encinas, I have a couple questions. One is, how well has Visions worked in terms of doing this blended funding? Is the new Visions program we've got, that's the correct name, right?
Yes, sir, iVisions, yes, sir, the tablet towns. Well, right now, we're in the process of learning it still. And we're going through some growing pains. But the end result we see is that through iVisions, a lot of the reports that, like, for instance, this AFR, right now we have to run a separate reports through app just to be able to fill in the boxes here. iVisions is already programmed to generate these reports automatically. So there won't be any issue as far as having to run the separate reports and then manually fill the actual AFR itself. Same thing for budget. It'll be a lot easier.
And what's the time frame for having that generate the reports for us?
We'll be able to do it at the end of this new year. I mean, we'll have that done. I mean, hopefully just with any journal entries, we should be able to have an AFR late September latest.
Thank you. The second question I had was on the budget. You said if, with current year funding, or prior year funding, our budget, we'd always set a maximum budget level for everything. Is that correct? On prior year?
On prior year, we always knew what our budget was, because what happens is when we adopt the budget, that budget was adopted on the prior year's 100th day count.
Right, and it gave us a maximum limit of what we could spend.
And that number is a maximum that you would have.
Right.
Now, during the course of the year, if you had increased enrollment of more than 3%, then you'd qualify for sudden growth,
Okay,
but it had to be more than 3%. So in other words, if you had 2.9% growth in your enrollment from the prior year to the current year, good for you, as they would say.
Yeah.
You have 3% more kids, but you're not getting any additional money till the following year. In other words, the problem with the old way of doing it was that your funding always lagged a year behind what your actual expenditures were.
right.
So the rationale for current year funding is that you're going to be funded based on what your needs are this year and what your enrollment is this year. So
Okay, my question is, we set the budget at the beginning of the school year
Right.
as a board, and in the past, that was basically our maximum that we could go to.
Right.
We could go lower, but we couldn't go higher. With current year funding, can we go, if the
And that's
numbers go
what-
up?
And that's what we did.
So
Basically, we projected that we would have 15,257. Okay, that was a conservative estimate based on the enrollment that we saw last year, the decline. If it comes in at more than 15,257, say it comes in at 15,258, we can go back and revise our budget for that one student.
Okay, so we no longer have that restriction. Okay. Mr. Holmes?
Mr. Hart, just, can you sparked a question, let me ask it a different way, if you don't mind, Hector, but does that impact our revenue control limit?
Yes.
So that's kind of that whole, kind of the technical term used, kind of, so that there's a revenue control limit based upon your enrollment that you can never overspend for. So right now, if enrollment shifts, we can adjust, which will then adjust our revenue control limit, correct?
Part of the problem though is that in our case, like for instance, if when we adopted a budget based on 15,257, we have a revenue control limit that's set based on that number. Now, the state has figured out that, for all the districts in the state, they figured out of your budget, based on the assessed valuation, then you have to generate X number of taxes for that revenue control limit. So you set a tax rate. So say you set a tax rate to collect $1 million worth of taxes, but then your enrollment goes up, and you need more revenue, but your tax rate's already set. So you can't collect any more taxes for the students that you would actually have. So it's a lag of 1 year in the tax collection for the expenditure of the budget that year.
And the legislature made no
Not that I'm aware of, no. What happens?
adjustment for that.
Don't blame me.
What'll happen is that if there's a deficit balance in your cash balance and on your revenue side, well, the following year, you have to make that up and raise your taxes.
Right.
Mr. Holmes, did you have something to add?
No, I thought it was an important point, because it speaks to kind of the complications of current year funding, although it may sound, like it's the right decision to make. The instability in month to month in enrollment can create a back end issue in the tax rate, depending how much fluctuation happens there.
Is there any further discussion? Ms. Dawn?
I move that we approve the 2016-17 annual financial report as submitted.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Couch?
Aye, motion passes. Is there any other business of the board?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Likewise.